Okay. So, Steph, the reading I found, I just pulled out A Thousand Mornings by Mary Oliver and opened it at random, and this is what came up. Today, today I'm flying low and I'm not saying a word. I'm letting all the voodoos of ambition sleep. The world goes on as it must, the bees in the garden rumbling a little, the fish leaping, the gnats getting eaten, and so forth. But I'm taking the day off, quiet as a feather. I hardly move, though really I'm traveling a terrific distance. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple. So, all yours.
I'll unmute myself. It would be a long, silent time. Good morning, everybody. I see so many of my friends on here. I want to hug all of you. So before I dive into telling you all a few what I hope to be interesting stories about my life, I just wanted to say thank you to Libby for inviting me to this week's edition of The Elder Tree. I was saying it with an announcer voice while I was like reading through my notes. It's The Elder Tree. I don't know that it's that exciting for a Saturday morning, but we'll see. I gotta say though, the process for preparing for today was super grounding. It allowed me to reflect, and ultimately it became a profound source of gratitude. So I was all up in my feelings getting ready for today, and it was super great. So for people who don't know me, or maybe don't recognize me because we haven't been in person in a long time, and my hair cut and my hair color changes pretty frequently. So if you haven't seen me in a minute, it's all shaved on the sides. It's teal. I had a shaved head a couple years ago. So I try and fly under the radar, but with this color hair, it doesn't work so well. So my name is Stephanie Ketterl, and in the recent couple of years, I'd say, I've been going by Steph. I like it, it's shorter. And I don't know, Steph, just easier. I signed Stephanie, seems a little proper and stuffy, but it's something that a few coworkers were calling me, and I was like, yeah, I kind of like that. So just a little bit about, like introductory information. I identify as queer and I am a cisgender woman. And like my name shows up here, my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I've been in Rochester for the past, I had to count, 17 years. So I feel like Rochester's home. Where I came from is no longer home. This is home. And I would say if you asked anyone close to me, they would tell you that I'm pretty sassy. I'm passionately curious, and I'm a foul-mouthed optimist. So read between the lines. I swear a lot. I'm going to try not to here out of respect for the actual elders, but I'm sure a few of you have heard me drop an F-bomb or two. So another important thing for me, and it's a source of pride in my identity, is that I'm a first-generation college student. I was the first person in my immediate family to attend college and earn a 4-year degree. So I paved the way for the rest of my family, including eventually my mother, who did go to college for a 2-year degree. And I gotta say, when she was whining about papers and projects, I was like, no whining here. So being a first generation college student is super important to me because it really created this quest for knowledge, learning. It's really how I became curious and always wanting to gain more knowledge. It's something that I'm proud of too. So for anyone who is into astrology, I don't know if there is anyone who's into that, but I'm a Taurus. My birthday was in April. And so it's probably no surprise that I'm strong-willed and I like to do things in my own way and in my own time. So that'll be a theme probably. So jumping into my family, my family of origin, ethnicity, things like that. Growing up, I was always told that I was a mix of Polish and German. Nothing more, nothing less, just Polish and German. My mom's side, allegedly Polish, my dad's side, German. So after, I don't know if people do like Ancestry or the 23andMe where you spit in the tube and send it away, and then magically on the app, it's like, you're all these things. Well, I'm a lot more than just Polish and German. I'm also French, British, Irish, and then like a little pinch of Scandinavian and Greek. Who knew? So I don't know that that shifted very much. I joke with my wife's family that I have been adopted into Italianism because I love learning Italian words, but only the naughty ones, which Carrie's grandma has taught me, and I tend to say them loudly at inappropriate times. So I'm not Italian, but I embrace that part of my family's heritage. So my dad's side of the family, we'll start there, I guess. It's pretty sizable. His parents had 5 kids. So he was the middle child. He was also the only boy, which is wild to me. I don't know how he did it, but it also made him patient for what was to come. So in my dad's side of the family, I did have a few cousins. My dad's oldest sister had a few children, but they live in Texas, and I've only maybe met them once or twice when I was like quite a bit younger. I've met my aunt a few times, but again, for financial reasons and because it's distance, I don't really see them that often. In terms of just the general feel of my dad's side of the family, we're not really close with any of them. There's a lot of dysfunction. And at this point, it feels right to just stop trying to figure it out. Like, I'm not in the business of fixing it, so it is what it is, and I'm at peace with that. So I think of, when I was prepping for this, I was trying to think of like, tell you some info and then tell you a story. So there's a couple stories in here, and it really stems from memories that I have from being a kid and growing up. So my memories of my paternal grandmother, so my dad's mother, was not super great. So she did have a talent for making the world's greatest cinnamon rolls, like the best. They came in this like, I don't know, cookie sheet size, wrapped package. It had the wax paper. It often had like a string. And when you saw that white package, we would all scurry and be like, oh my gosh, grandma made these. They're so good. But other than that, she was so grumpy and mean. Like, that is all I remember. She was just grumpy and mean. And honestly, if my name was Blanche, I would probably be grumpy and mean too. But so hindsight though, I didn't realize it until I was a little bit older, and when my grandma got sick, that she suffered for many years with alcoholism, which I did not know. Like, I didn't notice it growing up. And I was like, did I smell it? Did I see it? I guess I didn't really know. And one of the other things that she struggled with, which kind of followed her after her passing, was her, I guess it would be an addiction to shopping on TV, like QVC. And she had these like auto renew things that were showing up at the house well after she passed. So this stuff like kept coming. My dad's like, what do I do? So there's some goofy, very specific memories I have of my dad's mother. Another thing to know is one of my dad's older sisters also suffered from alcoholism. She had a son named Michael, and he is the same age as I am, so we grew up together. And what I did know is that his childhood wasn't that great. I didn't exactly know why, but I was a little more in tune of my aunt's alcoholism. I remember the rock glass always on the table. I remember her breath always smelling like alcohol. So there's like smells are a big part of my memories and growing up and how things stick with me. So the thing about my aunt is that her alcohol abuse was so severe that by the time she was like in her early 50s, she could no longer care for herself. She could not manage her finances. She really couldn't do much of anything. And it was referred to like shrunken brain syndrome. It's like Wernicke-Schwarzkopf syndrome, I think is what it's like, what's called, but it has to do with an abrupt stop to alcohol consumption, and it causes some shrinkage in the brain, which really impairs cognitive abilities. I don't know a ton about it, but I saw the impact and saw her decline. So she remained in a nursing home for the rest of her life, and she's actually the first person that is immediately connected with me that I know passed away from COVID. So it was really surreal, not super sad because I hadn't seen her in years. But that was something that will definitely stick with me. My paternal grandfather, he was a perpetual shit talker. I'll say that. So I see some traits from him that I definitely have. He could have a conversation with anybody, but he could also like give people a hard time, very jovial, like be a little sassy. So my grandpa Ketterl, he lived a good life, I would say. He spent his years, like most of his like working life, at Seal Test Ice Cream. They don't exist anymore, but I used to joke that he lived so long because he was in a freezer for most of his life. You laugh, but it's true. I don't know how he lasted so long. He ate Hostess pies, ice cream out of a container. He fried hamburgers. He smoked cigars, but he lived like a long and awesome life. And so I like to think maybe that'll be me too. So my grandpa wasn't at work. He had some hobbies. I mentioned cigars, but one of the other things that I specifically remember is that he used to fix up bicycles and sell them out of his garage. No matter when we went there, there was easily 10 to 20 bikes at any given time, and he would just have the garage open. I don't know if he ever actually sold any of them, but there were always tons of bicycles in the garage. So that's my dad's side of the family. My mother's side of the family is pretty small. So I would also mention like my parents are both still alive. They're both still married, although there were a couple bumps in the road where I'm like, oh my gosh, which one of you is going to kill each other? They love each other very much. They work through their stuff and things are pretty great right now. So my mom's family's small. My grandma has one sister who is married and has 2 kids. So I guess they're like my second cousins, great cousins. I don't know how that works. Again, small family. So my mom has one younger sibling, a sister, and that's my aunt, and she has no kids. So it's just like my mom, my aunt, and my grandma. I never met my maternal grandfather, because I think he passed away pretty shortly after I was born. His name was Floyd. And he was in the Army in the Special Forces, a Green Beret, I guess. It was like specialized something. And following, or perhaps like as a result of his military service, his life included, here we go, here's a theme, alcoholism, injuries. He became addicted to pain medication. He had a whole bunch of like health problems. I don't know that there's anything good that anyone has ever said about my mother's father. He also was unfaithful to my grandma. He was also abusive to my grandma and his children, so my mom and my aunt. I did not always know these details until I was in my 30s. So how did that come about? Learning these details about my mother's family is not something that happened, like I said, till about my mid-30s. I was traveling to visit friends. The flights were cheaper on JetBlue out of Buffalo than they were Rochester at that point. So I parked my car at my parents' house and got a ride to the airport. So on my way back, my mother picked me up. I had the day off, so did she. So we stopped at a diner and had lunch. So I don't know if the stars were aligned perfectly or what happened, but it was one of those infrequent moments where both my mother and I were undistracted and we were really communicating well with each other. This does not happen very frequently. So up until that point in my mid-30s, I was literally the only person in my family talking about mental health. And I was definitely the only one seeking mental health related support. So in that great conversation that I had with my mom, in an effort to just like figure out like, how did I get this way? You know, what's the backstory? Because I never really had the full story. As much as all this stuff happened, I don't know a lot of the stuff about my family. I wouldn't have unless I asked. Like everything is very, like our culture is like hush hush. We don't talk about stuff very much. So I asked my mom some pointed questions. I needed to know where her stuff came from. So anxiety, depression, responding to trauma, in order to make sense of my relationship with her. So it's just like a quick little like recap of the conversation. I asked my mom, was Floyd rough with, did he abuse grandma? Yes. I had a shocked face. There was always a hunch, but oh my God, this is definitely real. My mom replied to me, it was bad. Imagine being a young teenager and being the person kicking your father out of his own home. I was the person who put his belongings outside on the front lawn. My next question, did he abuse you and your sister? Yes. So this conversation, as gut-wrenching as it was, allowed my mother to open up about her own struggles with mental health and the subsequent treatment that she was finally receiving. So I'm in my mid-30s. She was in her early to mid-50s. My mother is very young. And she also shared with me the stigma that she was experienced from some of her so-called close friends. And that hurt my heart because it's definitely different. I talk about mental health with my close friends all the time, but this is not something that my mother really opened up about easily. And when she did, she was met with resistance and people minimizing what she was going through. So in that moment, I was super glad that I had some professional and life experience that helped me to be compassionate and supportive and not just like, oh my gosh, this is happening. So the conversation was hard, but honestly, in that moment, I found the spark of the divine. So as a kid, I spent a lot of time at my great-grandparents' house. Like not a lot of people I know met or were alive when their great-grandparents were alive. So my grandmother's parents, I had the pleasure of meeting and spending time with them. And some super cool memories. My great-grandmother was an artist. She was a painter. And she painted a lot of still life, mostly still life, and some flowers and things like that. My mom found prints, and I'm pretty sure at some point in the near future, I will have my great-grandmother's art tattooed on my body somewhere. And if people haven't seen, I'm pretty covered. So I got other space. It's just not, I'm running low. So I really wonder if that is where my love of flowers, the conservatory, taking still life photos for Instagram comes from. It doesn't look the same as what my great grandma did, but there are definitely some common themes. And my great grandpa was a woodworker as a hobby. I don't think that it was his job, but he was a woodworker. And I'm pretty sure that I'm the only person in the family that still has a piece of his work. And it worked out as I still have it. It's this little dog. So I'll try and hold it up close. It's pretty simple. It's nothing too complex. It's like lightweight wood. I bet like derby cars, like Boy Scouts made, it's like that kind of light wood. That'll be a tattoo someday too. But I have this, and I'm pretty sure no one else has wood from great grandpa. This has traveled with me across state lines to many, many apartments and 2 different homes, and I'll always keep it. And then just the last 2 memories about my great grandparents, they both included food. So my great grandma had a super duper sweet tooth. And I don't know if people remember those little like raspberry gummies that are like red and like dark, dark purple, almost black. And they have the little nonpareil like dots on them. I'm not explaining it great, but Patty's nodding her head, so somebody knows. My great grandma used to feed us those. And then the other treat that she would give us are like Nutter Butters. Right now they sell them, they're like cookies and they're shaped like a peanut, but she used to buy those it's like a sheet of wafers and they would break into little, okay, people know, into these little pieces. And I don't know, the crunch or whatever felt so cool, but that was like a great grandma treat. And my great grandpa, I remember his knife skills because he was a woodworker. He was like great at cutting things, including vegetables. So I remember him always making like cleaning and cutting leek. I was like, oh, this seems too complicated, but it was totally worth it. It smelled delicious and he would make this leek soup. So now anytime I smell leek, I think of my great grandpa. So back to my mom's side, my grandma, who I have not talked about yet, is awesome. I'm actually going to see her on Monday for the first time in like 7, 8 months. She's turning 81. I turned 41. She turned 81. So again, grandma's young. My family's young. I'm pretty grateful for that. I was embarrassed in high school because I was like, oh, my parents had me when they were super young. Now I realize how cool that is. So my grandma, back in the 60s, was a Buffalo Bills cheerleader. I'm like, she was. I know they didn't do like wild like flips and stuff, but there was definitely pom-poms. She had like the whole getup. She painted this like mole on her face. I've seen the picture. She was a Buffalo Bills cheerleader. She also in her career worked different jobs, including like programming cash registers. My grandma was like a techie nerd before that was even a thing. So I thought that was pretty cool. She did remarry, and my step grandpa, he's just grandpa, was pretty incredible. He was born on the 4th of July and he sang bass in a barbershop quartet. So super cool. Music was always a part of their life together and with the rest of the family. So much so that when he passed away, and I grew up Catholic, all of his music people came, and basically after the funeral, like the meal afterwards, there was hundreds of people and it was like a concert. There was dancing and singing and there was like 100. Yeah, so cool. Super cool memories. So one last thing about grandma. Her last job before she retired was with Wegmans in the cosmetics department. And this was the coolest thing, and one of the best memories I have is that every October my grandma would go to a trade show to like learn about all the new makeup that was coming out for like the holidays or whatever. So she would come back from the trade show and bring this huge box to our house. We would all sit around the table and she would unload the makeup into the middle of the table. She would talk to us about it because, you know, otherwise it was sort of scandalous that she was just giving us all this stuff. She's like, this is new. She would tell us about all the products and then we would patiently wait our turn in a clockwise fashion. You get to pick what you want. sister gets to pick when you want, mom gets to. So we would do this every year, and it was like the weirdest tradition. People are like, wait, you did what? But it was something we look forward to every year. So I think from that experience, I would say that I got my need to have options. So I have a lot of different lip gloss, a lot of different makeup, a lot of different hair colors, and I'm blaming my grandma. I've dyed my hair since I was 14 or 15. Kool-Aid was the first thing. Did it in the bathtub. My father lost his mind. So that's like yeah, he was really not happy. I still flinch thinking about it. Now I scrub my own bathtub. I know why he wasn't happy. So I'm the oldest of 4 children. I was born in Buffalo, New York on a Sunday morning in April of 1980. My mom was 20, so I talked about how my parents were young. My mom was 20 at the time that I was born, and my dad was 22. So something that not a lot of people know about me is that I was born with a heart defect, and that's called patent ductus arteriosus, PDA. And so basically, if there's some medical people here, you could probably explain it better, but there's an opening between the 2 major vessels from the heart, and that's normal. There's like a hole. And once the baby's born and their circulatory system is working, it closes up shortly after you're born. So the thing is, mine didn't close. And if you don't correct this problem, it can lead to congestive heart failure, infection, all this other bad stuff. So my first time young parents were faced with what my mom referred to as the hardest decision of her life. In November of 1980, at the age of 7 months old, I had open heart surgery at Children's Hospital in Buffalo. So I didn't really appreciate it till I was older, but at that point I was small enough that the surgeon was able to operate through my back and go between the ribs so that they didn't have to enter and open up my rib cage, like open up my sternum. If you know people that have had surgery, they usually have that long scar right here. I don't have that. It goes from under my armpit across my back. So I never was really curious about this until I got older and had a better understanding. So then I became really interested in the surgeon who did this and allowed me to live this great, and I'll put air quotes, normal life. So Dr. Subramanian, I don't know if I'm saying it right. He was known as Dr. Superman, right? He was a pediatric heart surgeon, and he co-invented this technique where he would like cool down the babies in this like hypothermic chamber so that the babies would be inside of this. He would cool down their temperature slowly and gently, and that slowed down the circulation so that there was minimal blood loss during surgery. So this guy that like operated on me was like crazy smart and changed lives all over the world. It's still mind-blowing to me. And it was helpful for people like Jehovah's Witnesses who like can't receive blood transfusions, things like that. So it helped people with religious restrictions, but also, you know, everybody. So apparently this guy was famous. Young surgeons from around the world would come to Buffalo to learn his techniques. What I learned is he died in July of 2015. He was 81. So I have so many more things to say, but I will wrap up with this one last bit about my surgeon. Last summer, it was during COVID, and approaching the anniversary of Dr. Superman's death, I was in bed. I was just like having this moment of gratitude. COVID was so stressful for people. People were dying. And I'm like, you know what? I had a chance to live and I'm living a great life. I looked up his daughter on Facebook, not expecting anything in return. I sent her a quick note. I expressed my gratitude for all that her father had done for me and helping my quality of life. So a few weeks later, I noticed I had an unread message in Facebook Messenger. It was like, oh my God, she responded to me. So I'll read you her reply. And I was like sobbing by the end of it. Hi, Stephanie. Forgive me for not replying sooner, but I rarely use Facebook. I cannot tell you how touched I am that you took the time to write me. Something that my father rarely talked about with anyone was the fact that his mother had a heart defect that eventually claimed her life at a relatively young adult age. I believe that every baby he was able to save meant the world to him, and I'm glad that you were one and that you have been afforded a normal and hopefully very happy life. Thank you, thank you, thank you for this lovely note. I know what you mean. COVID is making many of us reflect on our lives. It was extraordinarily thoughtful and kind of you to reach out. All my best. I know, and I was sobbing, tears of gratitude. Again, this felt like a divine spark in everyday life. It felt like it. So that's the last bit of like highlights of life up to this point, and I'll just wrap up in a few minutes about church specifically. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently a Wellspring co-facilitator with Anna Kyler. And last week, our group talked about humanism. And so I pulled this quote out of here by Reverend Dr. Barry M. Andrews, his sermon, What Does Humanism Mean Today? And he said, up to that point, largely at my mother's urging, I had attended Lutheran churches in the various cities we lived in. I had dutifully completed the confirmation program, taken my first communion, and sung in the youth choir. But as hard as I tried, I could not bring myself to believe the Apostles' Creed. While I admired the figure of Jesus, the rest of it, frankly, didn't make much sense to me. So I was baptized in the Roman Catholic Church at Queen of Martyrs in Cheektowaga, New York. So Catholicism differs from, Reverend Andrews' beliefs about sacraments, roles of the Bible, roles of tradition, the importance of Virgin Mary, all the saints, and then there's this whole like authority of the Pope. So up until I moved from Buffalo to Rochester for a job after grad school, so 17 plus years, and largely at my mother's urging, I'd attended Catholic churches in Cheektowaga and the surrounding area of Buffalo, essentially my whole life. I attended Sunday school, first grade through ninth grade. There was a really big overlap in my Sunday school class and my classmates in public school because Cheektowaga is high Polish concentration. Polish folks in that area tend to be Catholic. Like I would see my Sunday school mates during the week in grade school too. So I literally saw these kids every day. I received sacraments of reconciliation, which is like confession, confessing your sins. That was second grade. My first Holy Communion in third grade. My confirmation in ninth grade. I think confirmation's probably like coming of age, similar to UU, right? So other, church and involvement, we go way back. Most of you know what I've done at First Unitarian. Well, when I was in the Catholic Church, I sang in the choir. It was a good mix of church elders. And then there was a whole row of my grade school friends and I who were band geeks in the public high school that wanted something fun to do on the weekend. So we sang in the church choir. I served as a lector. So I did the readings and prayers during the church service. Those of you might know, I have been a worship associate as a grown-up at First Unitarian. So there's a lot of parallels, but really I was a lector because the outfit was cool. I got to wear this big, huge robe and it looked like wings. I felt like kind of like Barb's laughing. I felt kind of like Madonna or something, I don't know. Anyway, the outfit was great. But as hard as I tried in that church community, I could not bring myself to believe the Apostles' Creed. I admired Jesus. He seemed like a cool guy. But a lot of this stuff, like original sin, no women in leadership, focus on guilt and shame, none of that stuff made sense to me. So moving to Rochester, I attended First Unitarian, a recommendation of a coworker and friend. And I was really like, I don't know. is this something I want to dive back into? It came from a lot of like hurt and anger and frustration. And so my visit to First Unitarian was like data collecting. I'm like, are women allowed to take leadership positions? Yes. Okay. Are all types of people welcomed and celebrated? Seems like it. Okay. Is the community oriented towards social justice? Yeah. Okay. And does the church support causes that align with my personal values? Yeah. So people like to say, oh, get your feet wet, do a committee, do this. I jumped in with both feet. Staff personnel committee. I did some compensation benchmarking and salary recommendations. I know Barbara's nodding her head, but Larry probably remembers too, because I think that's when you were on the board. And I was like freaking out, all these scary, intimidating people. And I have to show you my data. Now I'm like, psh, bring it on. What do you need? I was a Soul Matters facilitator. I did caring community with Patty. I brought food. One of my first things in church, I brought food to Jesse Werner over on Highland in the beautiful gardens back there. I would stay for hours and we would just chit chat and walk around. I did rain, food, and eventually overnights, because why not? Big, scary concrete building at night. Backpack program at Food Link, Connect and Breathe, Condom Fairy, and eventually on the board with Laura, who's also here. I was a participant in Wellspring with Libby, and now I'm a co-facilitator. I mentioned Worship Associate. I did 2 tours on the Board of Trustees, General Member and Vice President, and then I took the reins after Fearless Leader Linda as clerk. I make occasional guest appearances in OWL on the Rainbow panel to talk about my life as a queer person, which I did most recently a few weeks ago. We were outside under the tent. So I think it's safe to say that I have found my spiritual home here at First Unitarian. So the last 2 tidbits that I will mention are my memories from, like, some pretty funny memories from this experience. Connect and Breathe, we'll start there. Fundraiser, when it was first developing and kicking off, there was like a concert, Orange Sky, right? Because my grandma loved music, because my barbershop quartet grandpa really got her into that. I was like, Grandma, you want to come to this concert? I didn't even think of the fact that my Roman Catholic, pretty conservative grandma was coming through the doors of our church. My first freak out is when she went to the bathroom. What's in the bathroom? Condoms. Oh my God. Grandma's gonna freak. Introduction to the concert. Connect and Breathe after abortion talk line. Oh my God. Grandma's gonna freak. Patty is choking. She's laughing so hard. So I'm like, okay, this is great music. Waiting for Grandma to freak. After the concert, she's like, you know, this is a really good place. People need these resources. Like, it was totally a non-issue. It was like, oh my, I was so sweaty. I had sweat through my shirt. I was so nervous. My grandma's really important to me, and I thought I ruined it. But she was totally like, you found a good place. The second and final thing I'll share here is a silent auction years and years ago. Orange Sky, again, theme, was like an auction item. I bid on it just because I'm like, yeah, fundraiser, take my money. You can play me some songs. Well, we freaking won it. We won Orange Sky. I had like a certain amount of time to schedule it to like redeem my winnings. So one day, my now wife and I were out to dinner. We're like, yeah, we should just get married so they can play at our wedding. So what did we do? A couple months later, it was January 1st, Reverend Scott met us at church. We signed the papers. And then a year later, we had Orange Sky at our wedding. And we got married at church. probably would never happen again. Carol Ann, bless her heart. My reception was at church in the sanctuary, 200 people. The food was there. Like we did it all ourselves. And so that's what I was like, I love this place so much that I want to have my wedding and every single one of my family and friends to be in this place, in this space. This is home. So I know that was a little long, but thanks for joining me. I only swore once, I think, so that's pretty good. Oh, I see claps.
I love this stuff. I am so glad to have this. Laura Humphrey says, tell us about your wife. And you also haven't told us about your living situation, which.
Yeah, I skipped a whole bunch because I noticed the time, right?
You've got, we're here till 11. So.
Okay. So my wife's name is Carrie. I met her a year after I moved here, so 16 years ago. We met on MySpace. So I think this crowd's probably missed that. You might be on Facebook, but MySpace was like the very first social media. And Carrie found me because she was like a player looking for the cute ladies. I'd make fun of her still. She was like, well, you didn't have a preference on your profile and you looked really cute. So she messaged me, we were talking. She's like, hey, I have these tickets for a concert. I didn't end up buying them. We went to coffee and we talked for like 2 hours. And she was super duper flirt and was seeing 2 other people. I called my good friend on the way home and I was like, yeah, there's 2 other ones. They'll be gone by the end of the week. They were. So the rest is history there. I knew she was my person. It hasn't been easy, but it has been worthwhile. So we have been together ever since that coffee date. And if you shop at Wegmans, she is the manager of the cheese shop on Ladder Road in Greece. So that's where she is right now. She did corporate stuff. She worked a desk job. That was like a big thing. Are you going to think less of me if I work at the grocery store? I'm like, no. In fact, it's awesome. You're happy. I'm happy. There was something about career, maybe.
Yeah, I think Ruth said. But you and Carrie also live on a farm, right?
Right. Oh, she's really pushing for those details. Okay, we'll go there. We live on a wannabe farm. So we spent 8.5 years living on the west side of Rochester in the Maplewood area on a street called Electric Avenue. It was one of the first streets in Rochester to have electricity. Who knew? People usually sing the Eddie Money song. We're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue. So we don't have a song anymore at our house because 8.5 years, we decided we wanted more space because we became like avid gardeners. So just about 5 years ago, I think it'll be 5 years in January, February or something, we moved to Penfield. It's like Webster School District, Penfield address. We're on Shoecraft Road. The biggest intersection is Plank. So if you're a cyclist, we're at the top of the hill. It's usually when people need to take a break and drink some water. Today, as a matter of fact, like 20 people. It's like biking on Saturdays. So we have under 3 acres. It was largely empty and bare with the exception of a pear tree and one bunch of daffodils. That is it. Things have changed. We planted 13 other fruit trees. We have 2 16-foot beds of blackberries, a bajillion flower beds, a little drainage pond. We have so much stuff. And one of my favorite things in the world to do is cut the lawn. Who knew? Riding mower, so therapeutic. But what Livy really wants to know about is all of our animals. We are a rescue-only operation. I'm the stepmother to 2 rescue cats. They're like dogs, so I can deal. Dolce and Gabbana, they're 17 years old. They're probably around here somewhere. I have a high chair. They're old now, so they can't get up and bother me. It's kind of great. I have 3 rescued dogs. Vera, Bradley, like the designer. She is 12. Chai, who's down here with me, she is also 12. She's in hospice right now. And Fancy Beckham, she is 10, and she's a rescue from New York City. She came with that name and she stayed with that name. And the friends outside, we have 5 chickens. So our friends moved out of state and they gifted us their 3 chickens in October, right around the haircut time. One of those chickens got eaten by a hawk. It was tragic and horrible and gruesome. I'm generally a non-emotive person in emergency situations. Gotta be honest, I lost my shit in the middle of a field. You probably heard me crying at church. It was the most disgusting and horrible thing I have ever seen. Broody Judy, rest in peace. So yes, and that was her name. So the surviving 2, Momo, named after Muhammad Ali because she's a fighter and has literally escaped death at least 3 occasions. And then the black and white one is a big booty, attitude-y chicken. Her name's Lizzo, after a musician who is very boisterous and makes herself known. So Lizzo. March, we rescued 3 chickens. Who knew you could rescue chickens? We drove to Buffalo because my mother's like, oh, hey, Steph, there's this chicken named Jolene at the SPCA. You should go get her. She knows I'm a sucker. Well, I called. You can't just take 1 chicken with 2. They'll beat each other up. So the farmer lady's like, hey, well, we have this group of 3. You want to come get those? I'm like, fine, let's go. We have 3. They're a year old. They're second season, so they're a year old. Red, because she's red. And she's kind of like bossy know-it-all. If anyone watched Orange is the New Black, there's a character named Red. That's who she reminds us of. And then there's 2 we call the twins, Venus and Serena, like the Williams sisters, because they are totally beautiful, but also like really strong. So I'm like, all right, you're like Venus and Serena. The new friends and the old friends didn't get along. They tried to kill each other for weeks and weeks. We tried to do integration. Not always, things don't go as always according to plan when you deal with rescues and you're not raising them from babies. So we recently finished a construction project. We have a double wide coop now. We like basically mimicked the coop and enclosure that we had. We ripped off the enclosure, built the second half of the coop. So Dumb and Dumber have a side and the 3 Amigos have a side, and their enclosures are separate. So if you drive past our house, you'll see the big metal enclosures. So they each have their own like run. They can see each other and they sometimes fight through the fence, but it's working out okay. We get 4 eggs a day, 4 eggs a day, so occasionally 5.
Yeah. That's my grandson's chicken is named Meatball. So I love your names.
That's amazing. Come by anytime. Come by anytime. Chicken therapy is real. If you need to.
I don't love them the way my grandson does.
I pick them up every day.
Chicken someday. But I do. Ruth Myers says, tell us about your career, which you haven't mentioned at all. And I'm really curious in the last few, is how did you end up getting to college as the first one in your family? And then how does that lead into the career?
Okay, so all right, ready, go. I was undeclared. I was a commuter. I went to Buffalo State College, eventually declared sociology as my major. I didn't go anywhere far away or private school because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And, you know, you are not spending our hard-earned money, which I have student loans, whatever. Either way, sociology was my choice. I did not study abroad or do anything exciting like that, but I did do national student exchange. So basically I went to another school in the country for an entire year instead of like fancy things like study abroad. So I went from Buff State to North Carolina State University in Raleigh, night and day. It was like a different country, 60,000 people, the own bus system, Division I, mind blowing. I lived on campus, obviously, and I realized at that point I was missing out. Like, to have a full college experience, I really needed to be in the thick of it, live on campus. Moved back to Buffalo for my senior year, did not live on campus, but still kind of had that in my head, like, that's a meaningful thing for people. I worked at the Center for Health and Social Research doing public health research. I had this job, it was an internship turned job. And I could have kept doing that. I was like, this isn't my forever thing. I got to figure out another plan. I had a childhood friend who was going to Canisius, and she said, hey, there's this grad program that I think you'd be awesome in. I applied. It was, of course, after the deadline. I was a hot mess and rough around the edges, but someone gave me a chance, interviewed me for an assistantship. I got it. 2 years at Canisius. I really had nothing holding me back. I was applying for jobs all over the East Coast. One of my internships was in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, so about 40 minutes outside of Boston. That was in housing and residential life, which is now really what my career has largely been for the past, since 2004, 2003-ish. So I work at St. John Fisher College, and I've worked there since I moved here. That is unheard of for people in my age bracket, right? Like, I'm a Gen X, almost millennial, and job hopping is sort of a thing. I have not job hopped. I've been fortunate to move up and do different jobs within the same employer. And honestly, I haven't talked about it because I've done a lot of work on shaping my identity outside of the workplace, because I realize how important it is, especially with COVID and how it was honestly sucking my soul. So I focus on a lot of things outside of work so that I'm able to resume on Monday morning with a refreshed mind and really more like a better attitude. I am job searching though. I'm looking for something else. I don't know what that something else is. I've been offered a couple of jobs, like 5 or 6 jobs over the past few years. But until it feels like the right one, I'm just going to do what I'm doing. So I've done academic advising. I've done student life, student activities. A couple of years ago, I was actually in charge of the entire commencement planning process. So we drew 8,000 people downtown at the arena. That was my thing. All sorts of stuff. But now I'm back in residential life. I'm in charge of recruiting, hiring, training, onboarding, evaluation of all of our student staff, which include RAs and our desk attendants who monitor visitors and guests. So it's pretty busy job. I like working with college kids. They're developing their minds and figuring stuff out. And it's nice to kind of push them out of the nest when it's time, and pretty rewarding.
And you can go home to the chickens and carry.
Yes, right. Like, it's a good separation, because when I get here, I can't always dwell on work. There's a lot of mouths to be fed here.
Yeah.
People say, do you have kids? No, I have 1,500 kids at home, at work. They all live on campus. I have 1,500 of them. When I get home, it's all of my furry and feathered friends.
Yeah. Steph, I am so, because I do know you from Wellspring, and there's so much that I didn't know. And it's always a gift to have this kind of connection. And I'm really delighted that you said yes when I reached out. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you can be an elder anytime. We don't ask for any kind of passport or anything for people to join this.
Well, I'm honored. I'm honored to be among greatness here.
And I love how you have embraced this church as your spiritual home. So that's really good.
I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, y'all.
Our blessing.
Oh, I got some thumbs up. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Next week, Anita Augustin is going to be our speaker. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. It's really good to see you again. So goodbye. I love you. Be well. Bye, Steph.
Bye.